Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IoT For All Podcast. I'm Ryan Chacon, and on today's episode, we are here to talk about IoT and edge computing, how they work together, how they're different, challenges when building out IoT solutions, and what edge computing can do to help solve those problems. With me today is Julian Chesterfield, the founder and CTO of Sunlight.io. They are an infrastructure platform company focused on building those applications that run at the edge. A lot of value here. I think you'll enjoy it a lot. Subscribe to our channel, give this video a thumbs up, and hit that bell icon so you get the latest episodes as soon as they are out. Other than that, on to the episode. Welcome, Julian, to the IoT For All Podcast. Thanks for being here this week.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the conversation, but I wanted to kick this off real quick with having you give a quick introduction about yourself and the company to our audience, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, happy to. So my name is Julian Chesterfield. I'm the founder and CTO of Sunlight.io. We build an edge compute platform that makes it very simple and easy for enterprises and customers to deploy and manage applications and services at the edge. And the edge for us is anywhere outside of the traditional core data center, whether that's in industrial environments, in retail stores, supermarkets, restaurants, things like that.
Fantastic. And do you have any, sounds like you all cover a variety of different industries. Do you have any that you kind of are more hyper-focused on right now, or is it pretty widespread?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're obviously quite widespread, but I think the areas that we're seeing the earliest adoption of edge compute infrastructure, I think particularly in the retail space, retail restaurants, quick service restaurants, where there's a lot of modernization and technology acquisition that's starting to happen, and also in the industrial space as well. I would say those are probably the main focus areas for us.
Fantastic. So let's go ahead and kick this off. I wanted to ask you kind of a high-level question. We've talked about edge computing in the past, very different kind of angles here and there depending on the guest. But today I wanted to kick it off by asking you a question that I know kind of comes up a lot in conversations that I have outside of the podcast, which is when we're talking about IoT, we're talking about edge computing, they often get talked about together. But can you kind of just high level explain it to our audience as to what is the real difference when people are talking about edge computing versus IoT?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I see it, I think, obviously the two terms often get used together, and obviously they're very complementary technologies. I think the way that I see it is that, it's really about the scale of device. So IoT devices are typically, smart devices that run in an environment to be able to, capture data, things like sensors, things like video cameras, temperature sensors, movement sensors, things like that, which of course are becoming smarter and have the ability to be able to make smart decisions themselves. The edge piece really is the bit that ties all those devices together. So often there's some sort of logic that needs to run slightly further back from all of those smart IoT devices that are out there. To be able to run larger scale compute logic, to be able to tie together all that information. So really the two things are complementary, but often the edge infrastructure will run on slightly more capable nodes, more infrastructure that has more compute capacity and so on.
Fantastic. And when, edge computing has been around for a little while, but it's still growing in adoption in the IoT space, what are the main IoT challenges that edge computing is focused on solving?
Well, I think really, what we're seeing is this, more significant amounts of data generation starting to happen. There's a lot more latency sensitive applications now that need to be able to, either process data and infer, certain information from the data very quickly. So to be able to run control systems and things like that, where you have to be able to make critical decisions very quickly in order to perhaps make a decision about switching a machine on or off, or changing the temperature control for something. And that comes from a lot of different sources, and we're seeing particularly the acquisition of a lot more video data now that allows in the industrial space, for example, using video analytics to be able to identify safety attributes in an industrial environment, or being able to track movement and movement of goods and things like that. And those types of decisions need to be made quickly. And
Yep.
often the bandwidth associated with that is very significant. So you've got large volumes of data being generated that you can't necessarily, or you wouldn't necessarily want to transmit into a large cloud data center, for example. You want to be able to process that data on the site. And really that's, I think, one of the key drivers for more automation and more intelligence being pushed out towards the edges.
Yeah. Are there any cost benefits when it comes to kind of the edge, pushing a lot of that to the edge as opposed to pushing it back up to the cloud and dealing with it there? Like what are the, like, what
Yeah,
other benefits are there, I guess, associated with it?
I think increasingly there is a lot more cost benefit. We're seeing the emergence of a lot more edge appropriate hardware that's becoming more
Mm,
commoditized. We see, for example, in the video analytics space, things like the NVIDIA Jetson platform, which is a
mhm.
purpose-built system on chip board that has embedded GPU processing capability. And this is, significantly lower cost than what we see typically today in the data center in terms of the cost of GPU capability and so on. And so we are finding, I think, that it's becoming more affordable, both from a transmission point of view, not having to have very large network bandwidth capability in order to transmit lots of uncompressed
Right.
video data up into the cloud. But it's more affordable now to put compute infrastructure close to where the data is generated.
Fantastic. I also know I've had some guests on talk about being able to incorporate machine learning kind of at the edge, other, and also run AI models and things like that. Is that something that, or I guess, how does that all kind of fit into the edge as well?
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties in with what I was saying before, and I think that's one of the things that the edge compute capability can really bring to the table, is the ability to be able to run a machine learning model against the live data that's being generated in that environment. So you can make decisions about things like facial recognition, or identifying objects. If it's something like a quality control system on a production line in the factory, being able to very affordably identify defects in quality control and things like that. Um, that sort of capability, being able to run that on the edge compute infrastructure is really key. And some of that is leveraging things like GPUs to be able to accelerate that processing and drive that logic. We also see a
Right.
lot of machine learning models that run on just general purpose compute as well. It really
Mm.
depends, I think, on the granularity of data, the number of samples that have to be generated, and how fast that data has to be. Those decisions
Right.
have to be made.
Absolutely. Yeah, it does always sound like it's a decision on kind of to what extent are you building out or implementing the decision making at the edge, depending on your use case, what your needs are, and things along those lines. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, because we haven't really dove into this too much in the past, is when it comes to deploying edge computing, or just kind of working on bringing edge computing into a solution, what are some of the challenges that you come across or customers of yours have come across in the
Mhm.
past, that are kind of worth noting or worth kind of mentioning to the audience for them to be on the lookout for, understand that when it comes to edge computing, there are challenges you have to consider or think about, and how to kind of navigate them?
Sure. So, I mean, some of the challenges that we see, generally across edge environments is that, you often don't have a lot of technical staff in these locations. If you think about, an industrial factory setting, or a retail environment, these are not places where you have technical teams on site often to be able to deploy, manage, and support that infrastructure. So, edge computing infrastructure has to be very robust, ruggedized, and very
Hmm.
reliable.
Okay.
Ruggedization is another thing. A lot of these environments are not, it's not running in a air conditioned, rack mounted, server data center
Right.
environment. Often these are servers that might be up on a wall or under a desk, so they have to be able to run in these sort of ruggedized environments with, just normal, air cooled. Often we see
Yep.
some embedded system on chip type devices. Um, and then the other challenges I think also sort of scaling, as the edge often we characterize as being hundreds or thousands of distributed locations, and each location might be just a very small compute unit that needs to be able to run in that location. So challenges around manageability and scale for all those devices. Those are the sorts of things that we see that really differentiate the edge, I think, from traditional data center environments, cloud environments today.
Right. Right. If a company has a deployment it's already out in the field, can you kind of implement edge computing practices out into something that's already deployed, or how does that kind of work if there's a system already being used, and the benefits of obviously edge computing could greatly affect
hmm
the success of the collection and the interpretation of the data? How's that handled?
So yeah, I mean, most edge sites aren't greenfield deployments. There's often,
Okay.
if you take the retail environment, there's often some compute, there's some applications that are already running in those types of environments. What we're seeing is this drive towards bringing in new technology solutions and being able to manage that more efficiently as these stores become more technologically advanced to be able to run those sorts of environments. So one of the things we focused on with the Sunlight solution is very much, we build a type 1 hypervisor based solution, which allows us to run any type of legacy application. So you may have
Okay.
some sort of legacy Windows servers running, for example, in these environments. Those can be lifted and dropped onto the Sunlight platform alongside more advanced sort of containerized solutions that might run in those environments as well.
Fantastic. One question I wanted to ask you, kind of as it relates to this conversation, and it's been a pretty hot topic recently, is computer vision, and kind of how that works, and how that's a very good example of kind of the power of edge computing and what can be done, on that side of things. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of the requirements that go into making computer vision possible, and kind of just, I mean, even a high level, just so our audience understands exactly what computer vision is?
Yeah, I mean, at its core, computer vision, of course, is taking video feed data from high quality cameras, and being able to infer and make decisions about data, and the visual data that's being processed. I mean, we see things like, a classic example that I use is the things like the just walk out technology that we're seeing in retail environments now, where we've gone from having very manual checkout processes where you have somebody sitting at a till, or you've got a machine where you're scanning a barcode in order to
Right.
check out goods, to using fully automated computer vision driven logic in these stores, where you've got hundreds of cameras now in the ceilings or behind shelves,
Right.
tracking people walking through a store, figuring out what they're picking off the shelf, identifying
Right.
what those objects are, and then allowing you, when you walk out of the store, to then charge you for that, for that what you've walked out with. And the logic that sits behind that is you've got to have a lot of machine learning models that run on compute infrastructure that sits behind all of those high perform high bandwidth cameras, and that, of course, that's very latency sensitive workloads. You've got to be able to make
Right.
decisions quickly, and you have to be
Right.
able to track that in real time. So that's a great example, I think, of how the that the logic has really moved from this sort of very centralized model running in the cloud or in the data center out towards the stores themselves. And that's the
Absolutely.
kind of thing that drives this technology acquisition in those environments.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for kind of breaking that down. Um, we talked a number throughout this conversation. We talked a number of times about kind of use cases and different things companies are doing, or examples of solutions where edge computing is being deployed and kind of the benefits. But I'd love it to kind of break down a few other examples a little bit more in detail, if you wouldn't mind, just of organizations that are using IoT and edge computing kind of out in the real world, like some good examples, just to kind of bring this all full circle for our audience.
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of, a variety of different use cases for these, this kind of new technology. I think, a good example is in the industrial space, where, IoT and computer vision, camera devices are being used for safety. So, that's, always becoming, more and more important for companies that have to operate these large sort of industrial environments where you may have quite dangerous environments in some cases. Lots of machinery, lots of hot materials and things like that, and making sure that the people who are working in these environments are wearing the appropriate safety clothing, hard hats, things like that. We're seeing solutions where, in software using AI and machine learning now, these sorts of decisions can be tracked and made instantly in these environments to alert people, if they're not wearing the appropriate equipment or they're standing in the wrong place in a factory, for example.
Right.
That's a great example. I think another good one we've seen in the retail space is around using sensor devices to be able to control electricity consumption. So particularly with
Mm,
things like fridges and refrigerators and freezers in stores.
right.
Now. Particularly in Europe, we're seeing this huge increase in energy prices, and so it's become really important for these organizations to control as efficiently as possible the amount of electricity that they consume. So using smart software to be able to measure temperature and to be able to adjust temperatures for these types of devices is really key.
Fantastic. Yeah, it seems like the as edge computing grows, it's just going to the value, the benefits, the applicable use cases just continue to kind of expand. And I feel like everyone that I've talked to recently is very high on kind of what edge computing is doing, the benefits it's providing, and kind of the value overall that it's bringing to IoT deployments, whether they're like you said greenfield or they've already been kind of launched. Um, um, and it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting to kind of follow along and see what as technology evolves and all the other areas of IoT, the connectivity side, the hardware side, and just seeing what edge computing is doing to enable the analysis of data, the collection of data, the interpretation of that data, just a lot of different things that are enabling different use cases that probably weren't as applicable before or as kind of probable or likely to be able to be kind of worked out. So it's been a very interesting space to kind of follow along. And I wanted to ask you, as we kind of move through the rest of this year into just the general future, what are your kind of thoughts and outlook on edge computing? Like, where is it going? What are the kind of the next evolutionary steps of edge computing as it relates to IoT and IoT deployments?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think there's no doubt that the adoption of edge computing technology is really happening. We've talked about it for a long time. I think what we're seeing now is that enterprises are really starting to deploy technology solutions. They, in a lot of cases, they've been perhaps testing things in pilot phases and things like that, but really starting
Right.
to roll it out on a much larger scale. I think there's a number of things that will happen. Obviously, I think ultimately the edge computing technology market I think is going to be larger even than a lot of the sort of established data center technology market is today. I think we'll definitely see that, but I think one of the things we're very focused on, I think, is about what we're seeing, this sort of commoditization of edge computing in particular. I think we saw this happen with public cloud, where enterprises moved from running their own data centers, buying their own hardware, having their own IT teams, sort of managing this infrastructure themselves, to kind of almost outsourcing it into cloud providers as a subscription model. So
Sure.
you can benefit from the sort of scale and economics of scale that the big hyperscaler data center operators can provide. I think we'll see a similar model start to happen at the edge, and I think that will
Okay.
start with similar sort of subscription type models to edge infrastructure, to being able to deploy edge infrastructure, and then ultimately to sort of running this almost as a service for a lot of environments. I think that will be something that we'll start to see the adoption of new and interesting subscription models in that space.
Fantastic. Yeah, like I said, it's a very exciting space to kind of follow along for sure. And I'm sounds like you all have a lot of great things happening in the space. And for our audience out there who's listening to this and wants to follow up, learn more, engage kind of after the fact, what's the best way that they can do that?
So, get in touch with us, of course. We'd love to talk to anyone who's, exploring the space, or, who already has, some good solid ideas about the types of technology and solutions that they want to deploy. Come to our website, sunlight.io, and get in touch, and we'd love to chat.
Fantastic. Well, Julian, thank you so much for being here. Great conversation. I really appreciate the time, and I think our audience is going to get a ton of value out of this.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.